There's so much to digest on the pandemic today. First, the Prime Minister has revealed that hopes for the economy to bounce back in this quarter have now been trashed by the Victorian lockdown. Treasury has forecast the economy will shrink for a third quarter in a row as the Victorian strife sucks up to $12 billion from economic activity. And if you want to get a grip on why economic pain is not something nebulous, something abstract, consider the federal government's biggest pandemic announcement today. Millions of extra dollars for mental health services and suicide prevention programs, particularly in Victoria. This recognises the human toll of the severe lockdown. When economies are deliberately put into a coma, it's not some amorphous debate about balance sheets, share markets and bank balances. This is about livelihoods destroyed, jobs lost, investments ruined, and futures put in jeopardy. It is terrible. And it should never be done unless there are no other viable options. And certainly it shouldn't have to happen because of mistakes made by politicians and governments. The trouble with the Victorian debacle is that whether or not you believe the lockdowns and curfew are warranted or not, and there are lots of different views on this, the key point on which no one could possibly disagree is that the reason extra measures have been required is because of the mistakes of the Daniel Andrews government. Their quarantine bungles, poor contact tracing, giving a wink and a nod to protesters, allowing infected people to leave home, and all the rest of it. These are what have allowed the virus to get a run on. And to add insult to injury, when it announced the extreme shutdown that was going to hurt every person and business in Victoria, when they announced this earlier this week, the state government had not consulted with the industries and businesses who were going to be affected. We've heard from some of them through interviews on this program over the past 2 days. Businesses just didn't know what was going on, and it hadn't even been clarified with them at midnight last night when the lockdown officially began. Here's the tweet from Health Minister Jenny Mikakos telling people which businesses could open and which could not from midnight last night. She sent it out at 12:44 a.m, 3/4 of an hour after the laws had come into force. So after midnight, after the legal hammer had fallen, businesses were left to run an eye over these detailed lists, covering all kinds of companies and activities that would be allowed to operate or would not. And just to square the circle, after our interview about car parks last night, they will be allowed to open if they're being used by permitted workers. This is a level of government intervention that's hard to contemplate. The Soviet Union couldn't have emulated this kind of detailed economic prescription. Victorians need a permit to go to work. They're not allowed to leave home after 8 o'clock at night. With all this playing out and with the government suspending Parliament and also now delaying the inquiry into the quarantine shambles, Andrews finally faced some aggressive questioning today. Given the inquiry chief has declared there are no legal constraints on public discussions, Andrews was asked when he first learned about the quarantine mistakes.
It's not a question of being legally prohibited. No one's ever asserted that. I'll make a couple of comments and hopefully deal with this issue in broad terms. I'm accountable, because of the job I have, I'm accountable for any mistakes and all mistakes that are made. I'm not conducting this inquiry. I am not conducting this inquiry. Judge Coate is, and nor am I going to simply... Hang on a minute. I am not going to seek to provide you answers to questions that I simply don't have.
Now, to be fair, despite all the mistakes, all the pain and all the obfuscation, the Premier still has his public supporters. ABC breakfast personality Michael Rowland said it's refreshing to hear any political leader accept responsibility for government decisions and repeatedly declare the buck stops with him. This is astoundingly generous, of course. Andrews and Mikakos, the two people where the buck stops, must know what happened, who made the key decisions and what the consequences were. They must know those answers, because if they haven't found out, they would be derelict in their duty. And they should share what they know with the public. I mean, it's not a political game, this. It's a stuff-up that has crippled the state, set back the nation, tossed hundreds of thousands of people out of work, crushed livelihoods and burdened generations with additional debt. Clearly, it has also cost lives. and we played word games about who knew what and when, this is an outrageous ducking of accountability, a reckless ducking of accountability. And I can tell you, I don't think Victorians or the rest of the country is going to be happy to wait 5 months for the answers.